Can I just say, thank God the South Americans are in this tournament because they're the one thing that have made this tournament watchable. And it's no different here with Botafogo, the South American champions, beating PSG, the European champions, 1-0 in a very hard fought display. PSG came, they dominated possession, which everyone expected them to do so. Obviously, slight rotations. There's no João Neves, there's no Marquinhos, there's no Nuno Mendes, but there's still good players coming in, and they've got incredible depth, PSG, so it shouldn't be that much of an issue, realistically, when you're looking at a player-by-player basis. But maybe things like the fact that the South American League is only halfway through its season, whereas European teams have come off the back of a very long season, so there's a little bit more fresh, a little more juice in the legs, and a little bit more enthusiasm for the Brazilian teams. And as a result, their determination and their hard work paid off dividends, really, and they got the win against PSG in what I will say is one of the most unique tactical displays I've ever seen. It was such an interesting watch, and this is the one thing that I've enjoyed about the Club World Cup is you're seeing different styles, you're seeing different ways of playing that you don't necessarily get in Europe, and as I say, in terms of a mid-block, in terms of the aggression and fight and the style, I've not really seen anything like it from a Botafogo point of view, and I guess I'll just dive right into that now. Now, if I just sort of stop this and get you to look at this and ask you a question of what can you see here in its incredible compactness from Botafogo. Now, certain tacticos, I won't name names, the types that have 3 letters as their name and act real pretentious on the Twitterscape. But they'll tell you that not putting any pressure on the ball is a bad thing, as if there's only one way to play football. And I completely disagree. A really good mid-block works without putting pressure on the ball, but maintaining distances really well between yourselves and the players on the ball. And it was always within the game plan for Botafogo to keep the Vitinha in the pivot and the back 3 just in front of that initial line of press, that Arthur, Jesus and Savarino, but close enough so that they couldn't pull off any long switches. The only thing that was available to these players was the shorter pass. And the reason for that is because if you're going to go long and you're going to go for a direct pass, you telegraph that. You have to almost take a step back and look to drill it. And Botafogo could read that. They had time to. They were disciplined. And so the moment that Vitinha looked like he was readying it, Jesus could get close to him. Or Freitas could come up from his midfield zone and get close to him and press the living hell out of him and be aggressive in the duel, which he would often do. He would sometimes come up making it a bit of a 4-2-4. If there was no danger in his zone, he wasn't leaving a great chunk of space with a few players in there. The only way PSG could play was short, and so as much as there was inviting space in behind that Botafogo back line, they couldn't use it because they didn't have the quality and the ability to do so. And while they sat off Botafogo, as I say, they kept that initial line of 4 for PSG in front of their front 3. The back 4 was pushed up high, squeezing that centre of the pitch. So we know how much PSG overload. We know how much they rotate and how fluid they are in these moments. They had no space to do so. You can get the movements of the likes of Doué coming in, of Mayula maybe moving out. You know how they like to play. It's no secret anymore. We've seen enough games for them now. There was no space for them to do so. Completely blocked off, and this middle 3 in this section here, incredibly disciplined, incredibly aware to the angles that they were facing. So from these centre areas, if it was Pacho or Vitinho, you'd get Gregore who would sort of shield in front of the back 4. You get Alan and Freitas who would block in the passing lanes to the likes of Zaire Emery. There's no real angle that they could create, especially in relation to Arthur and Savarino, who could stay up a little bit higher just to get ready to press the wide centre backs. As I say, that compactness made it really hard for those central passes. And once there was a trigger, once there was a reason for Botafogo to press, boy, were they relentless. They were aggressive, non-stop, and did their best to force any kind of moment. So let's just say Vitinha received the ball with his back to play. That was the trigger. Jesus could look to press. Then Savarino would shield around and Freitas would come around. Gregore would, Alan would, and Arthur, because once Vitinha's direction was forced that way, be aggressive on him, but also prevent any pass that he could make in this situation. And if you look at the way that Vitinha would be facing here, there's nothing he can do with it apart from go backwards, in which case they would launch into a counter press. Jesus would then go up to Pacho and again try and force those errors, be aggressive, be relentless, and show the enthusiasm to play the defensive side of the game that Botafogo had completely. And it wouldn't just translate to this central area at all if the ball was moved to the wide centre-back. If I just moved this area here, and Beraldo got the opportunity, or Lucas Hernandez got the opportunity to bring the ball forward, then you get Artur moving close, you'd get Alan coming across, you'd get Gregore, Jesus in this area here, you'd get Savarino coming across. They did a really good job of adapting and reading situations to make sure that players were blocked off, that the player on the ball had no available passing lane. And it takes a lot of concentration, it takes a lot of focus, and it takes a lot of agility in your movements to quickly change between markers. And any time PSG had the ball deep in these areas, it felt like there was no available pass on. And the moment they did manage to find a player in this area, well then, he's squeezed. His original marker's ganging up on him. Alan can come across from Zaire Emery, shielding him in while going to then press Mayoula. It was so fun to watch. And, you know, defensive game plans aren't usually that interesting in the sort of aesthetic sense. But this, I thought, was incredible. So many little aspects, just the relentlessness that they played with. It looked like they enjoyed defending. I remember an old Sir Alex Ferguson quote, which is, you've got to enjoy defending, you've got to enjoy working hard. And this lot absolutely do. And in this middle third, there was no real way for PSG to play through. I also feel like not having Dembele makes them a little bit obvious in their rotations. You don't get that same dropping in from Ramos, and it felt like Ramos was consistently just marked out of the game by Barbosa and Jacunha. So he wasn't really involved. You don't get his dropping into these areas like Dembele would. And maybe just that extra option, that complete overload of central players, would have been an issue for Botafogo to deal with. We'll never know. But Ramos has been a little bit of a passenger so far in this tournament. As much as they battered Atletico in the first game, he's not really produced much of anything. And so he was a non-factor. The only way that they could really get joy is in these half-space zones here, just outside. But they couldn't do it through the likes of Hakimi moving in or the likes of Zaire Emery moving out into these positions because, as I say, the players on the ball couldn't get the time and space to produce any longer range passes because of how focused and concentrated the Botafogo players were. Pacho couldn't take the touch, steady himself and look to play that pass. Jesus would be on him, they'd squeeze up. So it could only be through short, simple passes. So if Hernandez was out into this area here, Arthur would go to close. Alan would then move across into this area here. Gregore would come across to Mayoula. You get Freitas moving in as well with Hakimi sort of still in his line of vision. Vitinha moving up and sort of blocking any passing lane into Pacho and Vitinha, with Savarino coming through. I don't know if you can hear that, but someone's mowing their lawn next to me. I hope it doesn't distract from the video. So as I say, that one pass that they tried to find with the Zaire Emery pulling out into that position is now no longer an option. Hernandez doesn't have the space to pass, he's forced long, but even though he's forced long, he doesn't have time to really pick his pass, so it's a bit of a hit and hope, and those generally don't end well. The odd time they could get a bit of joy was maybe Kvaratskhelia dropping into this position to receive the ball from deep. And this would attract Vitinha coming up close to press him. Now, usually in these positions, you get the likes of the centre-back coming into this area to make sure he's covering, to, you know, gamble a bit and make sure there's no half-space pass. But the moment that Vitinha would move into this position, he'd go to press Kvaratskhelia once he dropped. You'd get the defensive line drop and you'd get Jair and Barbosa and Tellez back here. And then what this meant was that the midfield three would come across, again, not a lot of space to travel because of the mid-block and because of how compact it was. And so Zaire Emery showing for the ball here, Mayoula showing for the ball here, whoever just happened to be here, would get blocked off by Alan, Gregore, Freitas. The midfield three would drop into their line and protect that central zone really well. Maybe even you'd get Artur moving back into this position, allowing Vitinha to drop in a bit. Savarino would move across with Jesus, and sometimes you would see that 4-3-3 move into a 4-4-2 with Jesus and Savarino as the front two, which was good because those were the main transitional threats from a Botafogo point of view. But again, the moment Kvaratskhelia could get on the ball and turn inside to look for any options, there were none. They were squeezed. Any runs in behind, they didn't have the time and space to do that because the defensive line dropped off so well and protected that half space excellently. And also, on the odd occasion that maybe even the midfield three couldn't come around, maybe that Jacunha had to come and engage and get a bit closer to Vitinha and block his vertical line. Gregore was excellent at reading these situations to know when he should drop into the defensive line, stay a little bit closer and block any space that opened up and still maintain that level of protection. And then also giving Jacunha the freedom to move inside and to move up a little bit more, to just engage and and just keep up that blockade of Botafogo players that meant the PSG just had no available option. The only time they did get a little bit of joy was from Kvaratskhelia taking on Vitinho one-on-one, moving onto his right foot and producing a shot or a little bit of magic, as we know to do. Doué did a little bit on the right-hand side. Even in a poor game for PSG, Doué just does something that gets you on the edge of your seat. Just really enjoyable to watch, and he's good and he knows it, and he plays with that arrogance, which I have absolutely no issue with. But other than that, it was a lot of long shots from PSG, a lot of wasted efforts, and full credit to the defensive work from Botafogo. It was an excellent game plan, pulled off expertly. I couldn't find a fault with it. And transitionally as well, this is where they hurt PSG whenever they got the chance, with the likes of Savinho and Jesus. And Igor Jesus, who I believe is going to Nottingham Forest. Am I hearing that correctly? I haven't heard anything that's properly confirmed the move, but it seems like that's happening. And look, I'm not going to pretend to have a great knowledge of this player. This is the first time I've ever seen him play, but they've got a player. They have got a player. His ability to hold up the ball in these areas once the ball went long, because they didn't look to necessarily play it around the back, going up from the goalkeeper, John. I love Brazilian English names. They're my favourite things on the planet. John, Fred. It's like a sitcom, innit? John and Fred. The John and Fred show. They'd go long. He'd start wrestling with the centre-backs, be a nuisance with his physicality, look to gain an advantage, hold on to the ball for a couple seconds, and look for a teammate making a run, maybe Arthur making the run on the outside, he could find him. His passing was pretty good as well, like his link-up play with his teammates and understanding the runs that he needed to find were really good. Also, his movement as well. He's not just a physical presence up against players. His movement was really good, and it showed with Savarino, who would come inside generally a little bit more to get on the ball and use his technical playmaking skills to find the runs of Jesus. And that's where the Botafogo goal came from. Savarino coming in, turning in on his right foot, finding the run of Jesus. Jesus using his powerful running, good dribbling skills, and getting a goal. A little bit fortunate with the deflection, but you make your own luck. And the odd time Botafogo sustained possession in these attacking situations, it would be through the fullbacks getting high and attacking the width and combining with the wide players, as they would look to move in a little bit more centrally. More so Savarino. Arthur could remain out wide and look for the overlapping or underlapping run of Vitinho. So let's just say if the ball was found to him here, he could move inside, look for Vitinho on the overlap, or look to hold the width, bring Hernandez over to him, and Vitinho could then look to use that underlapping run and find a pass in there, and they could create a crossing situation out wide. Alan would move into the attacking midfield zone with Gregore and Freitas producing a double pivot in those deeper areas. Savarino was just given a lot of freedom in his movements. He could come deep, receive the ball off the two pivots, maybe even off the two centre-backs, turn and play forward and use a bit of swagger and confidence that he definitely has to create good attacking moves for Botafogo. I thought his performance all round was excellent. As I say, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for Savarino and Botafogo to attack and get on the ball and demonstrate their qualities, but when they did, they made it count. And so this then gave Tellez the opportunity to attack the left flank, had to do it on his own a bit more because of Savarino's freedom, and look for those runs and slip those through balls in, as he did for the goal for Jesus. And Jesus' ability in the second half as well to hold the ball up and gain Botafogo those extra minutes, draw a foul, draw something, to just give a bit of freedom from the defensive play. And I probably should have touched on this more on the defensive side, but the way they put their absolute lives on the line to win the game in the end, Botafogo, was nothing short of commendable. Just a real good old-fashioned defensive display. Fought for every ball, put their neck and body on the line for everything. And you saw what it meant to them on the final whistle when they won the game, and absolutely thoroughly deserved. And I like to see more games like this because I think it makes the tournament a little bit better. And tomorrow there may be the case of a certain Chelsea losing on someone's birthday. Yeah, that'll be a fun one to cover. Cheers, lads. In a bit.